Creation's Journey to Life, Day 59, Word of God. Study the documentaries The Trap, The Century of the Self, and Psy-War for historical context. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that the fanatical belief and faith in the Word of God has transformed it into an imaginary weapon of the mind of self-interest that shoots flaming bullets of delusion to those not agreeing with believers. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that the Word of God is a living Word as the flesh the human implanted that is now the world as we know it. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that Word of God as the Bible has become one of the most effective instruments of abuse in the consumerism culture of the greedy that peddle mind power and spiritual consumption. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that the Word of God, through the mouth of man, leaves life as the victim, chosen for the purpose of those that seek power or live in fear. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that the Word of God as love is used in the foundation of love as consumerism to capture the slaves trained by family at home to honor the self-interest of the feel-good experience as a gift from God. While this approach is devastating all that have no money or does not lead to profit. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that the Word of God is used as brainwashing to keep the consumerism culture of self-interest unchallenged, as if it is the will of God to serve self-interest above all. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that the Word of God, for all history and all generations, failed to produce a world that is best for all life, confirming that followers of the Word of God are in fact just brainwashed slaves. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that the Word of God was compiled in the dark ages for the purpose of protecting royalty and elitism as if it is justified by God, making the Word of God an instrument of inequality that abuses life. Yet in spite of the evidence of the result of the Word of God, those trapped in the self-interest of survival will not allow the message of Jesus of equality to become reality, as the message of Jesus has been reduced to ritual sacrifice of a blood offering to justify the self-interest of the inner evil that can turn a blind eye to what is being allowed on earth in abusing life while feeling good and love, confirming that love and good feelings is inequality is in fact evil, as the living is not valued at all. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that the Word of God has been elevated to be holy while life, the only holy grail, is subjected to atrocity and torture, purely for the inner voice of man's self-interest to be validated as real, while the inner voice is in fact a programmed result of the living flesh, done without any understanding of how it really functions. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that the Word of God as historical context does not have all the history and is but a view of self-interest that becomes the justification used to abuse life and allow inequality. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that when we investigate all things and live what is best for all life, the world will be a place of peace and real love, and none of the current world system will exist. I commit myself to show that the Word of God is used by unscrupulous humans for the purpose of self-interest, power, and control by keeping the masses programmed, ignorant slaves that fear ridicule if they ever question what is accepted as holy, in spite of the evidence that the holy produce the unholy hell for most on earth, and only those with money have a holy, pleasant life of plenty. I commit myself to show that the Word of God has become weaponized in the minds of its followers that throw the knowledge around as if it is real, while the evidence shows a total state of insanity is produced in the followers of the Word of God that will harm life without the blink of an eye from the beginning of time. I commit myself to show that the Word of God as family handbook is also the manual of consumerism that makes the road to profit paved in gold for the greedy, while it is the road to hell for life in general on earth. I commit myself to show the way of the living Word as living flesh has been captured and institutionalized to ensure the creation of a constant stream of consumers for the consumer system of profit with no regard for what is best for all life. I commit myself to show that the institutionalized living word flesh is branded in the greed of self-interest, living as the fear and anxiety of not possessing the way to happiness that is the snake oil peddled by consumerism, even having happy pills for those that fail to become the embodiment of profit and success to pacify the crowd, while life is left as the dirty satanic flesh, while the flesh is the real truth on earth, completely decimated by world filled with abusers competing to see who can justify abuse with the best feelings and experiences and pictures to feel good with all the goods that define self-interest as apparently the word of God as the way to good that leads to goods as a right to the followers of God. I commit myself to show that those claiming to know what is after death do so with no real evidence, and that more investigation and common sense is necessary before each die, as the real story of life after death is not understood at all. Study the Life Review free downloads at Destiny to get more insight if you dare. I commit myself to show that all abuse starts with the family culture at home that brainwash children to not honor life, producing a world of competition and suffering for most. I commit myself to show that history is the evidence of the destiny message that the mess of earth is a result of self-interest and greed of the individual's free choice. I commit myself to show that the word of God should also be investigated, and only that which is best for all life always should be lived and become the living word made flesh to produce a world that is best for all life eternal. I commit myself to show that the living flesh is the Holy Grail, but at the moment, it is only the holy grave of the graven image. I commit myself to show that the history in the flesh of earth captured in rock should be investigated for context of how the mind disregarded the evidence of time before time catches up with the abusers and only leaves traces in the pages of the rocks of the book of earth. I commit myself to call on all that claim to have awareness to show this is the way life is respected in producing a system on earth that is best for all life eternal, as that will be the evidence of who you are eternally.